Throughout the relatively short, turbulent history of the United States, one thing has become more and more evident. We are not a united nation. Various political ideologies exist in the world, but it seems as though two have emerged as the clear opponents in the United States: the left and the right. These polarizing ideologies exist on a spectrum spanning from anarchy on the left to fascism on the right. Very few people would choose to identify with either of these two extremes. However, many people find themselves following extreme ideologies without realizing it. This brings me to the subject of this video, the alt-right pipeline. Before I begin, let me make it clear, anyone can become an extremist. Leftists can be extreme, but so can the right. It just so happens that extremism on the right typically evolves into stripping the rights from other groups and eliminating some groups entirely. But how do we get there? No one is born an extremist. However, somewhere along the way, radical ideology takes over and an extremist is made. In this video, I'm going to examine just how the alt-right pipeline can transform a centrist or even a leftist into a white supremacist. Like I said in the introduction, anyone can become an extremist. However, the alt-right has a specific demographic that is being targeted: the cisgender, heterosexual, white teenage boy. Typically, these are boys who also have an interest that makes them feel marginalized, such as gaming, anime, or anything not typically perceived as cool and masculine. They also tend to be more socially awkward and/or victims of bullying. These are the kind of guys who might fall down the incel pipeline, but that's another topic for another video. Usually, they're just looking for a place to fit in, a group to belong to. And to the alt-right, these are the perfect people to fall into their trap. Obviously, the alt-right is not looking to recruit women, non-white people, members of the LGBTQ community, or anyone who does not fit in their mold, because these are the people who they think they're superior to. Do keep in mind, though, that the alt-right does have a tendency to recruit non-white people, like Candace Owens, to appear normal and basically not racist. To the lonely, cookie-cutter white boy, the alt-right is a welcoming community where they're at the top of the food chain. The alt-right makes their members feel like they're part of an elite group of people who are more enlightened than the rest of the population. So of course these people are going to be drawn to this community. However, there's other factors at play. The early 2010s was when the right-wing community first got its start on YouTube. In 2012, the YouTube engineers modified the algorithm to show viewers videos that they were more likely to click on. At this point, the goal was to get more views across the platform. In response to this, creators on the site began to make videos with more outrageous thumbnails and titles so as to capture the viewer's attention and draw them to click on the video. This is how clickbait was born. As a result, YouTube changed the algorithm to prioritize view time as opposed to views. This is because the more time people spend on the site, the more ads YouTube can run and the more money they can make. Despite the fact that the average viewers went down on the site, the update was a success because it increased the overall watch time. A month after the algorithm changed, YouTube allowed all creators to run ads on their videos and earn ad revenue, when before only the most popular creators could run ads. Right-wing creators at the time took advantage of the new algorithm and shifted their content from more flashy clickbait to longer-form videos such as video essays and podcasts. This change worked really well for the right-wing creators as their community began to grow. From 2012 to 2016, some smaller left-wing creators emerged on the site, but they were completely eclipsed by the right-wing creators who had already capitalized on the system and the emerging wave of right-wing populism. At this time, YouTube had no intentional bias towards right-wing extremism. They treated these videos like any other music video or skit on the site. Some former employees claimed that YouTube executives were not considering the impact the algorithm had on the rise of right-wing extremism content. Rather, they were focused on drawing more watch time to the site. YouTube was chasing what they considered most valuable: attention. We live in a capitalist society, and over time, the commodities valued by capitalism have evolved. Throughout history, we've had several commodities that we consider valuable. Leather used to be a leading industry in the United States. Oil has dominated our economy and the economy of countless other countries, and rare earth metals are highly valued for their use in computer chips. These industries still exist and in most cases are still crucial to our economy. However, we now have a much more sought after commodity: your attention. Companies spend billions of dollars every year just to draw your eyes to their content for a few seconds. Content creators on websites like YouTube, Twitch, and beyond can put thousands upon thousands of hours a year into their content just to keep and maintain the attention of their audiences. Think about all the things you've done just to get some likes on Instagram or some views on TikTok. It all comes down to attention. So it's hard to blame YouTube for prioritizing view time, even if it means fueling hate on their own platform. In 2015, a team from Google Brain began to redesign the recommendation algorithm to a form of artificial intelligence that would make associations between content that the human brain was not capable of. This technology was not perfect, though. The AI had a tendency to place viewers in specific niches and only show them content related to that niche until the viewer became bored of the content that YouTube was recommending to them. Eventually, the algorithm was updated with a different type of AI called reinforcement learning. This AI, known as Reinforce, was essentially designed to get viewers addicted to YouTube. Not only were viewers recommended one video that they might enjoy, they were also recommended videos about other related content they might enjoy. So they weren't just watching one more video. They were watching more videos, which would bring up more recommended videos about the content they were watching. And it just keeps going. This was the most successful algorithm in over 2 years. Views increased by 1%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it resulted in millions of dollars in revenue. Reinforced learning also minimized the bias towards already popular videos, which made it easier to find more niche content on the site. Again, the alt-right was able to take advantage of this algorithm by tying their videos to other areas of interest. For example, a video about leftist bias in a movie would be recommended to those who liked content about movies and would introduce new viewers to the alt-right content. A video of a guy ranting about feminism while playing a video game would be recommended to those who watched gaming content. You get the idea. This algorithm did eventually change, though. YouTube continues to make changes to their algorithm. In 2019, a new version of the algorithm was introduced that promoted videos from reliable sources over videos with unreliable information. Around June of the same year, YouTube made another change that would recommend videos from reliable sources to someone who had watched a series of radical conspiracy videos. This was about the time that YouTube realized the role they had played in spreading right-wing conspiracy and extremism and began to take responsibility for combating the spread of misinformation on the platform. I personally don't believe that YouTube had any intention of this happening. They are, like most Silicon Valley companies, quite socially liberal, but I would say that they were ignorant to the part they played in right-wing extremism for a decent amount of time. In June 2019, YouTube updated its already existent but minimally enforced hate speech policy. This policy was specifically targeting white nationalists by condemning content that may be for the domination of individuals or groups or denying a well-documented violent event took place. Hate groups online are not exclusive to YouTube, though. They can be found on sites like Reddit, 4chan, 8chan, Discord, and Twitter. However, very few people will seek these communities out if they're not already white supremacists. YouTube is the primary platform for recruitment and gradual radicalization. YouTube is where people become red-pilled. If this video is your first introduction to the alt-right pipeline, then you probably don't know what the term red-pilling in this context means. This term is a reference to the 1999 film, The Matrix. If you've never seen this film, don't worry, I watched it for the first time before I started working on this video. Let me give you a brief explanation. The movie is set in an unknown time in the future where Earth has been taken over by super intelligent robots. The people are no longer in control of their own lives. Instead, they've been put to sleep and placed in the Matrix, essentially an artificial reality, a simulation. People can be woken up from the simulation and placed in the real world outside the Matrix. The real world is not nearly as nice as life in the Matrix, though. There's no organic material left on Earth. It's basically like living on a spaceship. This is a really poor explanation, but you get the point. When someone has been woken up from the Matrix, they are given a choice, either the red pill or the blue pill. The blue pill will put you back to sleep and place you back in the Matrix. The red pill, though, will wake you up. Those who choose the red pill are part of a select few who are enlightened on the truth of the reality they live in, and they are burdened with the task of saving the world from the robots and abolishing the Matrix. One of the directors of the film, Lily Wachowski, has come forward recently and stated that the movie was actually a metaphor for being transgender. If you don't know, The Matrix was directed by the Wachowski brothers, which is what they were referred to at the time. But in more recent years, both of them have come out as transgender women, making them the Wachowski sisters. Thinking about the film in this new lens is pretty interesting, and I really like the commentary being made. However, the alt-right took this meaning of the film in a completely different direction. Instead of red pilling representing coming out and coming to terms with your gender identity, it represents joining the alt-right. Making this connection implies a few things about what the alt-right thinks of our society. First, this implies that the left are the overlords of the United States. They are the people who are solely in control. This is obviously false. We have a bipartisan system, which means that both sides have relatively equal control. Donald Trump was president for 4 years, so obviously the left cannot be completely in control. The United States has a tendency to shift politically like a pendulum. One presidency is relatively liberal, we think it's too extreme, so the next presidency is relatively conservative. We think it's too extreme again, so we shift back to the liberal president, and it goes on and on and on. Second, this implies that we live in a false reality created by the left. I'm not sure how they think that this is accomplished, though. I guess they think that the left is filling our brains with their propaganda, feeding us false information to the point where we become so separated from the truth. Now, I'm sure that both left and right media sources spread misinformation to some extent, but the right is far more guilty of this. Right-wing media has a tendency to play into the fear of their viewers. They make the viewers feel as though they're being persecuted or threatened by the left, the immigrants, the gays, everyone. Fear-mongering is a huge problem in right-wing media. They're afraid of immigrants from Mexico because they're criminals and drug lords, and they're going to
Dig your jam! Dig your jam!
They fear the LGBT community because they have an agenda to get rid of all the straight people or something? I don't know. They fear the fucking vaccines because they have microchips and make you magnetic. You get the point. These aren't fears that just emerge on their own, though. These are fears instilled in them by the people they deem trustworthy. People like Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, and your great Aunt Cheryl on Facebook. You know, the pinnacle of intelligentsia. This was a long tangent, but you get the idea. The right thinks the left is brainwashing everyone. The third implication that is being made is that the alt-right are an exclusive, elite group of people who are going to save the world from the evil left. I mentioned this earlier, but the alt-right makes their members feel as though they are more enlightened than the rest of the population. They know something that no one else knows. This is how they rope people into their cult-like community. I'm not saying the alt-right is a cult, but they do share a few similarities. In a cult, you're put in an echo chamber. Everyone you know and all the things you see align with your views. Echo chambers are quite harmful as they don't allow people to logically consider other points of view because they simply don't hear them. Also, like a cult or a toxic relationship, you're put into this us versus the world mentality. Cults and the alt-right have this in common. They ostracize you from the rest of the world. Your friends, your family, if they're not in the group, they don't matter. You must dedicate your life to the group, and if you have any doubts or second thoughts, you are not truly part of the group. When I started going on this rant, I decided to look up some common characteristics of a cult, and boy do these match up well with the alt-right. Here's a few. The group has a strong us versus them mentality that often conflicts with greater society. Questioning, doubts, and second thoughts are bad and often discouraged. The group is focused on bringing in new members. The group teaches the followers that the end goals will justify any unethical action, making people do things that they would not have done prior to joining the group. Members are encouraged or required to only interact with those in the group. Members idolize the thought leaders of the group and never question what they're being told. Now, this may sound quite extreme, but the alt-right can be very extreme. The further down the rabbit hole you go, the more cult-like it becomes. But how can someone fall this deep? Surely at some point, they'll realize they've gone too far. A lot of us would like to think that we'd never fall victim to something like this, but it's easier than you think. This is how someone falls down the pipeline. Radicalization is typically done in 3 steps: normalization, acclimation, and dehumanization. These 3 steps are not mutually exclusive, meaning that just because you're in one stage, it doesn't mean you cannot also be in another stage. And these 3 steps are not linear, which means they don't always go in order and you can go back and forth between stages. But most of the time, radicalization occurs in these 3 steps. The first step is normalization. Normalization is usually characterized by humor and irony. At this stage, concepts like white supremacy and the Jewish question are too radical, so they're disguised as comedy and irony. Disguising overt racism as comedy makes the content more digestible to someone beginning their journey down the pipeline. When creators do this, they're normalizing hate to their audience. This is a very crucial step in radicalization, because if you don't consider racism and xenophobia normal, whether consciously or subconsciously, it's going to be difficult to journey further down the pipeline. However, normalization is very easy to accomplish because not many people will realize it's happening. That's kind of the common theme here. Most people are not aware that radicalization is happening to them. They think that they're just learning the hard truth about the world. The rise of edgy humor was crucial to normalizing radical ideas because it allowed the messages to spread to a wider audience. Edgy humor was and still is very appealing to the white teen boy, which is perfect for the alt-right because that is their target audience. Memes are the perfect disguise for radicalizing a large audience. Memes are made, posted, viewed, reposted, and reposted. Memes exponentially expand the visibility of radical ideas. Memes are typically perceived as harmless fun, so it's easy for radical ideas to slip under the rug. Memes and dark humor are the gateway. Speaking of gateways, let's talk about PewDiePie. I probably don't need to explain to you who PewDiePie is, but you may be wondering, why am I talking about PewDiePie? He's not a right-wing extremist, at least that we know of. You're correct. PewDiePie is not a right-wing extremist. Instead, he is a gateway to the alt-right community on YouTube. PewDiePie has had a series of controversies typically revolving around racism. I'm not going to go into detail about these controversies because there are countless videos talking about it, but I will talk about how his controversies have made him a gateway to the alt-right. PewDiePie, whether intentionally or not, has created a brand around edgy humor, which obviously appeals to the teen white boy. Even if you ignore his controversies, this is still true. PewDiePie made ironic racism seem okay. Racism is okay as long as I'm not actually racist, right? Racism is okay as long as I'm not directly hurting someone, right? Both wrong. Ironic racism is still racism. By disguising racism as satire or irony, you're making people think that any form of racism is okay. Some people may not catch on to the fact that you're being ironic or you're making satire, so it can still be incredibly harmful even if you're not intentionally trying to be racist. Of course, PewDiePie received a shit ton of criticism. He lost contracts, he made news headlines, but he never lost his platform. PewDiePie is doing absolutely fine. Another byproduct of his controversies was a wave of criticism to those who were offended and calling him out, calling these people the classic remark, snowflakes. This is kind of hard to avoid when it comes to the right. Anytime a leftist has a problem with something, they're deemed a snowflake. Conservatives, radical or not, take pride in the fact that they choose facts over feelings. I hate this phrase because it's just dumb in so many ways. First of all, conservatives are motivated by fear, which is a feeling, in case you didn't know. I talked about fear mongering earlier, but I'm going to bring it up again. Conservatives revolve around fear so much that they often overlook facts. The alt right's understanding of facts and reliable information is honestly really fucked up. Right wing media is incredibly manipulative and misleading, and I'll talk about that in detail later. Anyways, I do not personally believe that PewDiePie decided to become a gateway to the alt right, but I do hope that he is aware of the part he plays in radicalization and is taking action to combat that. His content also just appeals to the same target audience as the alt right, which makes him a logical gateway. Normalization is not obvious, but it is definitely effective in creating someone ready to be radicalized. The second step of radicalization is acclimation, which is typically characterized by milder, more approachable ideas such as anti-feminism or anti-social justice warriors. Once you've accepted the most basic level ideology being told to you, you're ready for more radical ideas. This process doesn't happen quickly, though, and you probably won't even notice it's happening. This process is designed to slowly acclimate you to more and more extreme ideas. Acclimation is something you're usually not conscious of. Instead, it's more a result of psychological habituation, essentially slowly exposing you to something over and over again until your brain accepts it. There's an immense amount of right-wing content that not only makes radical, unsubstantiated claims, but also affirms these claims. It would be impossible for you to process all of these claims and put them under equal scrutiny because there's just so many. Creators make a claim, and other creators who agree with them affirm the claim, even if it's not actually true. Everyone in the community is saying the same thing. If everyone you surround yourself with agrees on something, then why would you need to critically assess the information? You trust these people and no one is disagreeing with them, so you just take what you're told as facts. Echo chambers work for a reason. There's no need to seek out proof, it's just common knowledge to you. So, as you get down the pipeline, you begin to accept these new ideas you're told until they just become your default setting. If every YouTuber you watch is racist, racism will come naturally to you until it's the default setting in your brain. You won't even notice this change is happening because it just seems natural. You become desensitized to radical ideas until no idea is too radical. This is how someone becomes acclimated to the alt-right. Dehumanization is the third and final step of radicalization. Once you've been acclimated to these ideas, it's very easy to fall completely down the rabbit hole. Each step you take seems easier and easier the closer you get to extremism. At this point, you've completely changed the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you interact with the world. You've become so consumed by these beliefs that it seems like it's the only thing that matters. People who disagree with you are blue-pilled. They haven't woken up yet. The world is divided in two. The ones who are superior, the people like you, and everyone else. This brings me to dehumanization. At this point in your journey down the pipeline, you don't just see everyone else as stupid, you begin to see them as a threat. Everyone who is not like you is a threat to your way of life. They are all uneducated and uncivilized. This is usually where we see race realism or scientific racism. Race realism refers to a series of bogus theories that everyone descended from different parts of Earth and were divided into different races who had key differences in their biology. Those from Africa were said to have had smaller brains and were more akin to monkeys, therefore they were inferior to white people. Those from Europe had larger brains and were more sophisticated in many ways. There's tons of information on this bullshit. There are countless dickbags throughout history who have contributed to these ideas. They used horseshit science to justify the horrendous treatment of countless of people for hundreds of years. And you know what makes it so much worse? People still believe this. Every day, alt-right thought leaders are spewing this same bullshit, and every day more people believe it. So once you've reached dehumanization, you've already taken on these delusional ideas about race to the point where you no longer think of others as human. The scientists in the goddamn 1600s said that black people are subhuman. So it must be true, right? At this point, people who are not like you are not human. They are uncivilized and dangerous. So you must get rid of them. Deportation, murder, genocide, it doesn't matter because you are in real and present danger. You must protect your way of life. Conservatives seem to be entrenched in this idea of being persecuted. They are the most vulnerable group of all, the straight white Christian male, right? Christians are being persecuted, so you need to be willing to die for what you believe in. White people are going to go extinct, so you must protect your kind and the purity of your lineage. It doesn't matter what happens to the other people because they are the enemy. So, how do you protect yourself? You take their rights away and you eliminate them. The 2019 Christchurch shooter stated in his manifesto, "Any invader you kill, of any age, is one less enemy your children will have to face." This perfectly captures how the right perceives the people who are different from them. They're not human, they are the faceless enemy. The right thinks of everyone else as NPCs, lifeless clones who have not awoken from the simulation. They are not humans, rather humanoid beings who do not possess human rights. Therefore, the right, those who have been red-pilled, the humans, are morally superior and everyone else must be eliminated. Obviously, this third step is incredibly extreme. Many people don't make it to this step, but many people do and they stay there. So, we've made it to the end of the pipeline. What happens now? If you're familiar with the alt-right pipeline, you probably know who Caleb Cain is. If you don't, Caleb is a leftist YouTuber who fell down the pipeline in 2016 and found his way out about 2 years ago. In 2019, Caleb posted his first video in which he details his experience falling down the pipeline. Caleb grew up pretty liberal in a relatively conservative small-town environment. He went to college until he failed and was forced to move back home. Caleb became depressed and was feeling lonely, so he sought out self-help content on YouTube. This is when he found Stefan Molyneux. Molyneux was making some self-improvement videos that would draw more people to his right-wing content. Caleb and Molyneux shared some experiences, and Molyneux seemed charming and smart, so Caleb was lured in. Stefan blamed his problems and hardships in life on liberals, and he told his viewers that they could improve their lives by adopting a more conservative ideology. Caleb began to watch more of Molyneux's videos, especially the ones more politically focused, and he began to trust him. Molyneux became an authority figure to Caleb, so everything Molyneux said was taken as fact. Caleb began to agree with the ideas Molyneux was talking about. Molyneux would feature other right-wing creators on his channel, and Molyneux trusted these people, and Caleb trusted Molyneux, so these people became trustworthy too. Caleb began to watch increasingly more right-oriented creators as he shifted further and further right. At first, it was Molyneux, then Ben Shapiro, Paul Joseph Watson, and then Lauren Southern. He even started calling Southern Fasci Bay, meaning fascist bay. Pretty cringe, right? It just got deeper and deeper. Caleb was convinced that Muslim immigrants and cultural Marxists were a threat to his kind. He even began to believe in race realism. He began to refer to himself as a tradcon, a traditional conservative. This was now part of his identity and his everyday life. By the 2016 election, Cain was fully immersed in the alt-right. He watched videos of Hillary supporters crying at the results of the election. At 1:41 a.m. on November 8, 2016, he watched a live stream by Steven Crowder titled "Trump Wins" in all caps. In 2016, Caleb was consuming copious amounts of YouTube content, the bulk of the content being from far-right creators and a small group of even more radical creators. These creators did not disguise their extremism with memes or dog whistles. This isn't the end of the line, though. Caleb says he was never a full-fledged alt-righter. He never believed in Holocaust denial or the white ethno-state. He began to become uncomfortable with these radical ideas, but he considered them the uncomfortable truth that he was too afraid to accept. But then he found Destiny, a leftist YouTuber and streamer. He saw a debate between Destiny and Lauren Southern, and as Caleb put it, he destroyed her. Even though he watched Lauren Southern and agreed with her, he could not deny that Destiny knew what he was doing. Caleb was still skeptical, though. He wasn't quite convinced by Destiny's dispute against race realism, but he still continued to explore more left-leaning content. Caleb then found a video by ContraPoints, in which she argued that Americans were not under attack by immigrants and that race was a social construct. Unlike the other progressive creators he saw in right-wing videos, these leftist creators were funny and engaging to watch. Contra expressed that she understood why conservatives held their views. She didn't just attack them for being wrong, she presented a new logical perspective. When he first found these videos, he thought they were just leftist propaganda, but the more he saw, the less he could deny that ContraPoints had a point. She disputed right-wing claims with statistics and reliable sources. It became clear to him that Natalie Wynn knew what the hell she was doing. Caleb was hesitant to change his way of thinking, but ContraPoints presented arguments in a way that he really understood. Soon, he was a full-blown leftist once again. After the 2019 Christchurch shooting, Caleb decided he needed to do something to make a difference. He realized that he had played a small part in spreading hate on YouTube, and he wanted to change that. He decided to make a YouTube channel on which he would spread the left's message. His first video was about his experience falling down the pipeline. This video got quite a bit of attention because no one was really talking about the pipeline at the time. Caleb wanted to help others separate themselves from the alt-right, to show other men that you could escape the pipeline before you became a full-blown white supremacist. I would say that Caleb certainly accomplished this goal. He has had a huge impact on combating the alt-right pipeline on YouTube. So far, this whole video has primarily covered things that happened in the past 5 to 10 years. But I feel like this video would not be complete if I didn't talk about right-wing extremism in the present. Extremism in America has been around pretty much since the beginning, but it seems like in the past couple decades, extremism has grown more extreme. In the 90s, there was a right-wing anti-government movement that climaxed in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing that killed over 150 people. Let me make this clear. This is terrorism. Terrorism is not exclusive to foreign actors. Terrorism is any use of violence, usually against citizens, to accomplish political means. So yes, just because someone is an American doesn't mean they can't be a terrorist in America. For almost 20 years, it seemed like domestic terrorism had diminished. That was until 2019. In 2019, 48 people were killed by domestic terror extremists. 39 of those people were killed by white supremacists. In 2020, the United States had the highest volume of domestic terror cases since 1994. This trend was not exclusive to the United States, though. Around the world, right-wing extremism was growing in popularity. The 2016 election is pointed to as both a cause and effect of right-wing populism. The increasing number of conservatives resulted in Donald Trump's presidency. Donald Trump's rhetoric legitimized right-wing extremist views, bringing more people to the right. All of this allowed the right-wing media and political figures to do and say whatever they wanted. It didn't matter if it was wrong, as long as it's what people wanted to hear. Misinformation spread like wildfire. When people are being fed radical ideas, they're likely going to act radically. Hate crimes against marginalized groups have significantly increased since the Trump presidency. This presidency inflamed the division in the United States. Also, the Confederate flag made its return to our culture, so that's pretty fucking bad. Trump succeeded in radicalizing a nation by creating an us versus them mentality, which is a common tactic of the alt-right. There are so many factors that have led us to where we are now. The alt-right pipeline radicalized thousands of young people. Misleading media like Fox News has radicalized thousands to millions of older people. Social media allowed all of these people to come together and further radicalize each other. Donald Trump gave these people a cause to rally behind. He is the poster child of their revolution. Have you seen those goddamn TikToks of random conservatives pretending they're Katniss fucking Everdeen? These people really think they are revolutionaries. They think they are the saviors. But they're not revolutionary because what they want has stayed the same for hundreds of years. Conservatives want to return to the good old days where the man was the breadwinner and gay people didn't exist and people of color didn't have power. How can your ideas be revolutionary if they haven't changed in years? Returning to the past is not revolutionary. Moving forward is revolutionary. Changing the world around us for the better is revolutionary. Ideas like equality should not be revolutionary. They should be the default. But they're not the default. For years, Americans have fought and risked their lives to be equal, just to have the same rights and freedoms as everyone else. And for years, we have denied them, and we still do. In the past couple years, people have peacefully protested against police brutality. And guess what they got? Police brutality. People were tear gassed, hit with rubber bullets, beaten and killed. People are still being unjustly killed every single day. And yet, the alt-right was still able to use these protests for more conspiracy, saying BLM was a hate group, blaming Antifa, a made-up organization, for their own actions against the Capitol. Conservative extremists have concocted this web of conspiracy to the point where they can't tell the difference between what they're being told and what's the truth. All of these factors together have created the perfect formula for an extremist population. This is why people believe the 2020 election was fake. This is why people believe Donald Trump will be returning to office soon. These people believe this absolute nonsense because nonsense is all they know. Donald Trump and the right-wing media created this massive conspiracy, telling millions of people that the government needs to be overthrown. These people have been fed so many radical conspiracies that thousands of people flocked to the Capitol because they believed they needed to overthrow the government. I know that in our Constitution we have the right to overthrow a government if necessary, but I really don't think it was necessary. We are allowed to overthrow the government if our safety is threatened or if the government is acting outside of the popular interest. In case you didn't know, America is a democracy, and we have the right to vote for elected officials, and this is how we know what the popular interest is. And the popular interest was to elect Joe Biden. I don't love the man, but you have to say it's certainly an improvement. These people did not get what they wanted. Instead of graciously accepting defeat, Donald Trump spread conspiracy, convincing thousands that the government was out of control and must be overthrown. They made their own story. They spread this story. They believed this story so much, in fact, that thousands flocked to the Capitol in Washington, D.C. to overthrow the government. These people brought various weapons. They climbed the building. They ran through the halls looking for leftist representatives to kill. And what would they met with? A selfie with the riot police. Luckily, over 600 people were charged with insurrection, but thousands got off with no consequences. Throughout this section, I've talked about how misinformation has impacted the rise of right-wing extremism, but I haven't really explained or examined just how the right uses misinformation to fuel their extremist ideas. So let's get into it. Fake news is not a new thing. It's been around for a very long time. Deliberately misrepresenting information is just something we do, unfortunately. Everyone has intentions, but sometimes you'll find information that doesn't support your intentions. So what do? You lie. You change the information to whatever will benefit you. With every conflict, there's three sides. One person's side, the other person's side, and the truth. This is because whenever we have a conflict, we want people to take our side. So we minimize the things we did wrong, and we exaggerate the things the other person did wrong. We misrepresent information to suit our narrative. It's a shitty thing we do as people, but it's just a thing we do. This does not make fake news acceptable in any way, though. No matter which side is presenting it, fake news is not okay because you're lying to millions of people who are looking for you to tell them the truth. They are looking at you to tell them what is happening in their world. News is important. Whether it impacts you personally or not, news is news for a reason. The big events that are happening in our world have an impact on many people, either directly or indirectly. So when you have this position, people trust you to tell the truth about things that really matter. So when you lie on the news, you're changing the reality of the people watching. If you had a story about a volcano erupting in Hawaii, but instead you said the volcano was erupting in Los Angeles, that's a huge difference. People will freak out and think their lives are in danger when in reality there is no threat to them. And the people in Hawaii will have no clue of the risk that they're being put in because you lied. Does that make sense? So I think I've made my point clear. Fake news bad. Let's examine how fake news has been used by the right to change the reality of millions of people. Pizzagate. Before starting this video, I really had no idea what Pizzagate was. I had heard the term a few times and just assumed it was some sort of meme, but it's much worse than that. Alt-right communities created a fake story about a pedo ring led by Hillary Clinton inside a pizzeria. Cambridge Analytica was a company that monitored data from social media sites to build profiles of people and predict their political affiliation. This information would be used to target people with political memes and ads. Donald Trump's chief strategist, Steve Bannon, used this information to spread false and inflammatory claims against Hillary Clinton. I'm hoping everyone watching this video remembers the 2016 election because boy was it a doozy. Fake news was a term we heard every single day. This is thanks to our former president, the winner of said election, Donald Trump. Anytime he was faced with something that didn't help his narrative, he deemed it fake news. I'm not going to deny the presence of left-leaning fake news. In 2019, one Facebook story went viral claiming that Trump's grandfather was a pimp, a tax evader, and a member of the KKK. But there's also a shit ton of fake news on the right, too. Also in 2019, a fake news story claimed that Nancy Pelosi was diverting Social Security money to the impeachment of Donald Trump. Both of these things are false. But I bet money that at least a few people in the 2021 Capitol riot who were looking to literally kill Nancy Pelosi believed this story was true. Fake news creates conspiracy theories. If you believed the story about Nancy Pelosi was true, then you probably believed that people in Congress were actively making corrupt moves in effort to impeach your president. You watch the news and you see your president telling you fake news that affirms your theories. The conspiracies get more and more extreme and people believe it because it's coming from a place they trust, a place that isn't supposed to lie to you. Fake news creates an entirely new reality for the people who believe it, a reality in which they are in real present danger. So what do they do when they feel in danger? They take means to protect themselves. This usually involves harming others because due to the fake news, they believe that everyone else is a threat to them. Honestly, this makes me feel like the majority of these radicals are just victims of misinformation. Politicians and media have taken advantage of the trust people have in them so much that people become violent. But politicians and major news sources aren't the only places you can find fake news. It can be on social media. Anyone can make up a story and spread it. But most people now know that not everything you see on TikTok is true, but that's because most people understand that user 755233348 may not be a reputable source. Popular alt-right YouTubers are a different story, though. Usually we trust a politician because they're experienced, they went to school, and they're good at what they do. This makes sense, but anyone can be an alt-right thought leader on YouTube. People trust Ben Shapiro because he went to Harvard. That kind of makes sense, but remember that just because someone went to an Ivy League school does not mean they know everything. People like Ben Shapiro and Donald Trump usually get into Ivies because they have daddy's money. So we know Ben Shapiro went to Harvard, which gives him a little bit of credibility, but this is usually not the case for other alt-right creators. Parasocial relationships are a thing that everyone on YouTube has been talking about, so obviously I'm going to talk about them now. The nature of a parasocial relationship is kind of similar to a communalistic relationship in an ecosystem. In this kind of relationship, one party benefits and the other is unaffected. In a parasocial relationship, one party is making a profit and the other is not. Except the one who is not profiting off the relationship feels as though they're much closer to the profiting party than they actually are. The person profiting knows nothing about the other person. They usually don't even know the viewer's name or what they look like. But as a viewer, we know a lot about the person who is profiting off our attention. We know, at the bare minimum, what they sound like. Usually, we also know what this person looks like, what their name is, their gender identity, and everything else they tell us about themselves. And it's really hard to be a content creator and not talk about yourself and your life. We, as a viewer, feel very connected to this person, a person who doesn't know who we are and is making money off of us. The nature of this relationship is really easy to exploit. Some creators prey on their adoring fans to get something out of them, whether it be sex, validation, or money. The parasocial relationship is often exploited. And fake news is so much more impactful because it usually comes from a parasocial relationship. There's a power dynamic here that people are abusing to spread conspiracy and radicalize masses. If you've made it this far, first of all, thank you. Second of all, wow, you've listened to me rant for this long and you're still here. That's pretty awesome. But what now? How do we combat the alt-right? It's probably easier said than done. These people are riddled with fear because they've been lied to, convinced the rest of the world is after them. It's going to be hard to change their minds because they've been made to fear everyone who is not like them. They fear that if they change their ideologies, they're going to become part of the others that they feared so strongly for so long. If you're arguing with a right-wing extremist, they're not going to listen to anything you say because in their world, nothing you say is true. You exist solely to blue pill them, to convert them. You are an agent of the evil overlords like Nancy Pelosi. But none of this means that you can't try to change their minds. First of all, arguing and yelling and getting upset will simply not get through to them. It merely just affirms their idea of the liberal snowflakes. I'm not saying that you're not allowed to be upset by these radical ideas. You certainly are. I'm just saying that if you're trying to change a conservative's mind, emotion won't work. Sometimes logic won't work either. The best way to change their mind is to do what got them there in the first place: habituate them. Slowly and tactfully exposing these people to a new way of thinking is the best method to de-radicalize them. The end goal doesn't have to be converting them to a leftist. The real goal is to help them regain their grasp on reality. And extremists can be dangerous, especially if their ideology revolves around fear. First, they've got to be able to understand that not every source is a reliable source. A lot of people will tell you not to believe everything you see on the internet, but then they won't follow the same advice. Once someone understands that it's important to scrutinize the credibility of information, especially radical information, they are already on the path away from the alt-right. When our brains get conditioned to something, it's really hard to undo it. But just as habits can be learned, they can be unlearned. Usually, when someone is trying to eliminate a habit, they'll replace it with another habit. This isn't always a good thing. If you're trying to get off a substance, it's not a good idea to replace it with another substance. But if you're trying to change your idea on something, you kind of have to replace it with another one. De-radicalization can't always be done by the efforts of one person. There are a lot of changes that would need to be made if we were to try to eliminate the alt-right, and I feel like we're already making progress. YouTube has recognized the role they played in spreading hate on their website and has made moves to improve. It seems like, at least right now, the alt-right community on YouTube is not nearly as strong as they were. The leftist community on YouTube has grown in popularity in recent years, spreading the message against hate. Donald Trump is no longer president, unless he runs again in 2024, but otherwise his platform to spread hate and misinformation has been made much smaller. Hopefully we can continue to use this momentum and reduce the amount of misinformation and hate in our country. But change is never easy, especially when there are strong opponents to change. De-radicalization is not easy, but it is very possible. Leftist activism is becoming more popular in recent years because it seems like younger people are leaning more left, but younger people tend to usually lean more left anyways. Anyways, we have the ability to make big changes. We just have to keep pushing. I didn't really understand how some people could be radicalized so far. But once I understood that misinformation is what rules these people's lives, I realized that no one plans to be radicalized. Their fear and hatred is a byproduct of what they've been told. People are so filled with hate because that's what they've been conditioned to do. I don't want anyone to think that I'm sympathizing with the white supremacists or anything like that. I just really wanted to understand how someone can get so extreme. Not only does understanding radicalization help us see their point of view, it also tells us how to combat it. Once you understand the problem, you can then find the solution. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is my first video on this channel, but I'm hoping to make more video essays and longer form videos making commentary on film, media, culture, and politics. I had so much fun making this video, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye!